Hi everyone, thank you for joining me. Got another experience today to get stuck into. Hopefully this one can remind us about our true nature and give us some understanding as to where we came from. This one is from a guy with the same name as me, first name anyway, Nick. And looks like he is from the United States somewhere. So let's get stuck into it. I'd been struggling with my dad's passing for about 4 or 5 months when this experience occurred. It was June of 2009. My brother and I lived in a different state and we had no idea how sick my dad was. My dad was only 53, so when we received the call that he was on life support, we were in shock. He had a layer of fluid around his heart. We were told that we needed to drive overnight to the Midwest to get to him in time. Neither of us were prepared to have to make the decision to disconnect his life support. My brother couldn't be there. So I was in the hospital late into the night while he suffocated on his own fluids. It was very, very hard to watch and to listen to. For months afterwards, I couldn't hear coffee being brewed because it was like an electric shock that just flared all of the emotions up again. The last time my dad visited us, my wife, my son, and myself in Arizona, we had a great visit around New Year's Eve in 2009. He had driven from the Midwest to see us and seemed very tired and not himself. But I took it as him getting older and the effects of a long drive. Even so, he made a lot of effort to spend quality time with us, especially with his grandson. They built a model spaceship while I was at work. We went to go see Wall-E at the movies and we fed ducks at the park. It was really nice. At one point during the visit, we were talking about the afterlife. I wish I had sensed that he had been thinking about it lately because he knew his health wasn't in the best condition. We mentioned an uncle who had passed away. He talked about how the day of his uncle's funeral, he was having dinner with his mum and dad. Afterwards, in their kitchen, the microwave kept stopping when they were trying to reheat leftovers after the drive back from Wichita. He told me he knew it was his uncle. Dad told me he was going to do everything in his power to make contact with us after he had passed, and that I should watch for it. When I hugged him goodbye before he drove him, I remembered the feeling of his jacket, the smell of his aftershave, and a sense that this may be the last time I hug him and hold him tight. He made it home, so that sense I had, I shrugged it off. But I still clearly remember it to this day. After the funeral, and life had somewhat normalized, I felt lonely and more depressed and devastated than I could have ever imagined. I felt guilty for ending his life support like I hadn't given him enough time. I felt like a safety net in life had just been pulled out from under me and I was falling. I felt like he was not now aware of every aspect of my life, including things I wasn't so proud of, and felt ashamed. I waited and waited for signs. I would get home from work to an empty house before my wife and son came home. I would sit there in silence, hoping Dad would dial my phone from beyond, or drop coins or something, anything. There was nothing that happened. And I felt abandoned. Around this time, I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming and crying because waking up felt like the awareness of his passing hit me all over again. There were a few times in the night that I would get up in a panic. I would pass out on the floor trying to get to the bathroom to cry and get some water. One time, I'd cut myself on the corner of the large TV in our bedroom when I fell. My wife had to shake me to get me to wake up. It was an ordinary night when I wasn't feeling my worst and wasn't feeling my best. It was a regular weeknight and there would have been work in the morning when this incident took place. My wife and I were reading in bed before going to sleep. I know it's going to sound like I dozed off, but this was no dream. It was more real to me than anything that's happened in this world. Suddenly, I was in another room. There was no tunnel or journey to get there. I was here on earth in one moment and in another room the next. The room was made with shimmering gold light. The walls and floors almost looked like liquid fire, as if it were constantly moving. The best way I can describe it, it was a bit like a lava lamp, but pure gold, white light. It was what the sun would look like if we could look at it. But this sun created the walls of this room, and the moving light that almost seemed to vibrate or hum. It gave off a very nice feeling of energy. It was beautiful, and I felt so much love. This place felt like I had been there before, like being home. There was light coming from my upper left side, almost like daylight shining into this room. It is as if it were coming through a window, yet there was no window. It was just there. Everything felt perfect, like it was meant to be. I was just there. I didn't question how I had gotten there. I wasn't thinking about my wife, my son, my dogs. I didn't look to see if I had a body. I wasn't floating. I wasn't sitting or standing. I was just present. Then there he was. I knew exactly who he was when he appeared before me. This was literally Jesus. There he was, and I knew him to be the Son of God. When I saw him, he was like we picture him, pale white. He had these piercing, loving eyes and was perfection personified. It was at that moment I realized he could read my thoughts and we were communicating without words. I felt embarrassment because I was thinking, wow, Jesus really was a good-looking guy. Then came the doubts. Oh man, how embarrassing that Jesus knows what I'm thinking. I think he's good-looking and I hope he doesn't think I'm attracted to him. All of a sudden he laughed out loud. I remember it was such a laugh as his head went back. He made the actual human sound of laughter, but it was also like bells. The vibration it sent through me made me laugh. It was the best feeling I'd ever had in my life. It also communicated unconditional love. I was filled with relief as he sent me a message with no verbal communication. He loved laughter and these positive feelings. He communicated that what we think of as God, we can't even begin to wrap our minds around the concept of as humans. This created humor, laughter, and the love he wanted us to feel during our time on earth. He let me know that we concentrate too much on rules that make us feel bad about ourselves. I specifically wondered about my own sense of humor when he said that. He told me that we were all made perfect. I was made perfect, and that God created all of us perfect. So having a sense of humor was part of the human experience. This really stuck out to me for some reason. It is why he had taken the time to meet with me, to tell me to stop worrying so much, because I was on the path designed for me and I was exactly who he wanted me to be. All of a sudden I was back in my body. I was still awake with eyes wide open and gasping for air. It was as if I'd swooshed back into my body, and I was overcome by such emotion for such a beautiful, vivid experience. I excitedly tried to tell my wife what happened, but there were no words. I was trying to pick the right way to say, "I just met Jesus," without sounding like I was losing my mind. Since then, I can't say my life has always been a bowl of cherries. I can't say that there aren't days of doubt and days of challenge. That's what we're here for, and we learn from these instances. But I know for a fact that what happened to me was real. It was profound and intense. I couldn't tell if it lasted for days or seconds at the time. I tried talking to my mum about it a few months later. She told me that it was Satan at work disguised as Jesus and telling me to live a life of sin. I know it wasn't. I know what I saw and felt. I didn't take away my grief. It didn't take away my grief, but it let me know I was where I needed to be in my life. It was my path, and to stick to it, and that I wasn't alone. That's the end of Nick's experience. So that one was not near death. That was just an experience that occurred at the end of a dream. Some of you may think, well, that might remove some of the validity to it. It needs to be a near death for the soul to actually leave the body. I disagree. I think people can leave their body through meditation, through drug experiences, through dreams. It doesn't necessarily have to be a death for someone to have a spiritually transformative experience like Nick did. I can vouch for that from my own personal experience. I died quite a few times, but I never had a near-death experience. And my spiritually transformative experience happened, while I was conscious, while I was awake. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't even a spiritual person when all these interventions or signs from the universe started popping up in my life. And just because someone doesn't come close to death doesn't necessarily mean it's not a valid experience, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, and you're entitled to yours. But let's have a go through this again. So Nick, this man Nick is must be he's a young guy because his dad's 53. So he's in his 20s, 30s, and he receives a call that his dad is in hospital on life support, and this is quite shocking news to him and his brother. And they immediately decide to rush to his bedside. I don't know the geography of America too well, but somewhere around Arizona sounds like this is. It's a surprise because they didn't know his dad was sick, and sounds like he's got some sort of congestive heart failure. He's got fluid around his heart, and this is causing the body to choke on his own fluids, as Nick says. So then he kind of reflects a bit on the last time they caught up with him, and kind of sort of starts joining the dots a bit. He realizes that his dad didn't look too well during that visit. But Nick just shakes it off and says, let's just get him getting older. But then he's reflecting even further, and he remembers the last time he saw him, and he's hugging him, and Dad's hugging him back, and they even and it seems like an embrace that has a little bit more depth to it. And upon reflection, Nick can kind of see, well, this is maybe my dad was trying to say goodbye. He might have known he was getting close to the end. And Nick remembers they even had a chat about the afterlife during that last visit, because their uncle had just died, and it was on his mind. And as they talked about this topic, his dad kind of said something a little bit surprising. He said, when I go, I'm going to do everything in my power to make contact with you after I cross over to the next dimension. Signs and signals and connections with those we have lost, I would have thought was a huge leap to believe before my spiritually transformative experiences, and now I see that it is definitely a possibility and something that I even experience myself. So yeah, a few years ago I would have thought a medium was just a joke and not a possibility. But now I'm definitely inclined to believe that the gifts they have some legitimacy to them. That doesn't mean every one of them is an honest practitioner, but there's definitely some people out there with that gift. What confuses me though is like some people, when they have these experiences, particularly near-death experiences, they cross over and they totally remove from this earth realm, and they go into this dimension where human life isn't really even a thought. They're just so removed from everything that they experienced here, they don't even really think about it again. So how mediums and people tap into those souls that have crossed over to a dimension that seems so distantly removed from ours is difficult to comprehend. But having said that, when you do cross over, you are supposedly have access to everything and everyone, and have these powers that are so complex and beyond comprehension that contacting a little human down on little planet Earth is probably quite an easy thing to do and not beyond the realm of possibility. But yeah, like I said, I definitely feel connections to souls who have passed, and for me that's not a verbal or telepathic communication, more just an inner knowing and just more of an experience. Like you'll see a certain, you'll drive past a certain place, or you'll smell a certain smell, and you'll get that memory of that person. And yeah, just that thinking about them has that that extra bit of energy to it. And maybe it's all these near-death experiences I've read, and maybe I'm starting to just believe this stuff. And it's some people have this sixth sense, and it seems to be able to go a little bit further than the rest of us. And I guess until you are in that boat and you are able to connect with other souls that are no longer on this life. It's difficult for those of us who don't have that same connection to fully understand what that is like. But I think all of us just have that little bit of intuition or sense of connection at the very least. And some just have that skill to be able to develop that further. But yeah, for me, the interest in this topic of spirituality, mediumship, and connecting with souls that have passed away is not a huge passion of mine. Kind of get a little bit turned off by the topic of mediumship, and that's not to say that there's anything wrong with it, or people shouldn't pursue it, or they shouldn't try to grow their own mediumship skills. It's just, for me personally, I like to explore this bigger picture of who we truly are, what a soul is, what is this purpose of coming to life on earth, and just the idea of exploring what God is fascinating to me. And I think connecting with those ones that have passed is a beautiful thing and a powerful thing for humans, because grief is such a strong and powerful emotion that any help we can get to try and soothe that pain or establish that connection with someone once they pass on is a fantastic thing and very useful. But yeah, for me personally, it's a small part of what exploring spirituality actually means. So anyway, Nick has spoken to his dad, and his dad said, look, when I go, I'm going to try and contact you, and whatever that means. And like I just explained, that contact can be in the form of multiple outlets. Yeah, so he says goodbye, and he gets that sense of, there's something a little bit off today. Like, this day is a little bit different to most. I'm kind of sensing something is wrong or off here. And clearly, this is the last time they ever see each other. So they have the funeral, and life goes on, and Nick was obviously very close to his dad because he is feeling lonely and depressed and devastated. He doesn't really feel like continuing on anymore. He feels guilty for switching off that life support and never had to do that, but wow, that sounds like an intense and difficult situation, to put it mildly. Watching your own person pass like that, and you having that decision to turn that switch off, it would be very, very traumatic. And there's no it's clear, like it's a natural thing to feel like the rug has been pulled out from under you, and you're just falling, and you're just experiencing a lot of darkness and guilt. And he says, like, this is an interesting line, he says that now that he's gone, he feels like his dad's spirit is able to experience every aspect of his life. And this includes things that he is not proud of and felt ashamed. I personally have thought this myself. I've thought, like, we've all had people in our lives that we've lost. And if you have any spiritual bone in your body, you're aware that there's that possibility that that person is now in a form where their consciousness can, quite possibly have a life review, and that can mean delving into other people's lives and seeing what they've been up to, with or without you present. And that means they can get a good look at what your life was like from beginning to where it is now. or they could just be with you and watching everything you do. So I sense that's a strong possibility. And at first, it was when I started my spiritual awakening, it was a little bit difficult to get my head around that there could be someone there with me that I knew in this life that is witnessing everything I do as I speak. And obviously, like me, like everyone else, has moments that they are ashamed of. So the way I get my head around that is just understanding that they were human too, and they would have also had moments of guilt and shame. Secondly, we will be able to pass on one day and have a look at their lives and see the things that they weren't too proud of, and to remember that they're in this other dimension now, and the experience of being human is nothing to be ashamed of. It's all these little things we do that are embarrassing or give us guilt and make us feel bad or whatever. It's all just part of the human experience, and you can't escape from that. It doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States or the homeless guy on the street. You're going to be exposed to these feelings of guilt and joy and awe and being ashamed and embarrassed. It's just part of this human experience, and we're all going to do things that we regret or sort of go against what we believe in. It's just we're put in these situations as humans that force us to make these decisions sometimes. And I don't believe that there is such a thing as a right and wrong way to live this life. There's just we all do the best we can, and we can't avoid these situations where we are put into these situations where a lot of the time we can't win, and we're forced to make decisions that we don't want to. And there's always pros and cons to every decision we make, and they're in this other dimension. They're removed from this human experience now. Although they might somehow be able to witness what we're doing, I don't think they're looking at us with any judgment, or quite the opposite, actually, more likely unconditional love. But here we go, back to the story. Nick says he's waiting for signs, and he's waiting and he's waiting, and he'd often get home to this empty house and just sit there with his wife and son before they came home. And he's just sitting there by himself in silence, hoping his dad would dial his phone from beyond or drop some coins or make some kind of proof that he's there with him. But nothing's happening, and he feels incredibly abandoned. This is causing him some difficulties at night. He's waking up screaming and crying. Sounds like he's just, he sounds like he's just hit rock bottom, and like every aspect of his life is being consumed by this passing, and he is really being haunted by it. And I don't know, like, could he go and see a psychic or something like, I don't know, but he feels lost. He just doesn't know what to do. His dad told him that he would give him some signs when he left, but there is no signs that he can tell anyway. That prove to him his dad is trying to contact him. When I read this now, I'm thinking, maybe he could try meditating, just sitting there and trying to get out of his mind, because often when people do that, they are able to connect with spiritual guides and just get out of the mind. And because the mind, as we all know, is a difficult thing to live with sometimes. It is almost torturous in some ways, those same repetitive thought patterns that can haunt us from the moment we get up till the moment we go to sleep are very difficult to bear. Well, I know my mind is anyway. It's a constant battle trying to remind myself to escape from it and detach and put my awareness to something else, like what I'm hearing or what I'm touching or anything but what I'm thinking, because the mind is it's a difficult place to leave your awareness. It really is, because it's always analysing, it's always judging, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. The perfect example for me is when I walk into a huge place like a mall, and I don't know, like this happened to me yesterday. I was in a great mood. I was going to see a movie. I just got out of the car, and I'd never been to this mall before. I wasn't expecting it to be very big, but opened the door, walked through the door, and boom, there was like hundreds and hundreds of people everywhere. And I don't know about you, but for me, walking into crowded spaces, I don't know what it is. If it's I'm picking up the energy of everyone, and somehow that makes me very anxious, and my mind starts racing, and I just get a little bit panicky, and all becomes a little bit overwhelming almost. It's always been a little bit like that for me. I'm just, it's hard to walk into that environment and feel instantly comfortable. It takes me some time to sort of adjust. Same with, I'll go to a football game. There'll be thousands of people. It's just, I don't know if everyone's like that, but for me, I definitely feel a little bit uncomfortable in those situations. But anyway, a strange thing happened yesterday. After that happened, I went into the movie and saw the movie, and it was a very weird but enjoyable movie. What was it called? The Substance. Very, very strange. It was a horror, which I don't usually like, but this one was okay. It was okay. And anyway, so after that movie, I walked out back into the mall, and it was like I was a different person. Like, it's the same hundreds of people walking around talking, and I just found this incredible peace, and I was just really enjoying being there. I was just looking around in awe and wonder and just amazement at being in this human body, and looking at all the shops and all the different specialties people have, and just the miraculous nature of this existence. And it was incredible. And I was thinking, how can I feel like this now, but 2 hours earlier I'm almost having a panic attack? It was quite bizarre, but that's, and then I reflected on it a little bit more, and I thought, it's probably because I wasn't in my head. I wasn't thinking. I was just putting my focus into what I was hearing, how it felt to walk around, and then naturally this awe and wonder and miraculous nature of my and everyone else's existence started to invade me. And because I wasn't worrying about my situation and what I look like and what that person looked like, and what's that person doing, and what's that person think of me, and blah blah blah, and just focusing on things away from my thoughts, it kind of opened this doorway into this other realm of pleasure and joy. And every now and then I'm able to do that, but more often than not, my mind overtakes the experience I'm having and shuts me into this box of judgment, analysis, and semi-paranoia, I guess I'd call it. But not yesterday, and those moments are worth their weight in gold, and hopefully you know what I'm talking about here, but maybe not. If not, hopefully I explained it in a way you can understand. So, where were we? So, So this man, he is struggling. Like, his dad's died. He's getting up in the middle of the night. He can't sleep. He's just waiting for signs that his dad's with him, but nothing's happening. He's really struggling to cope with this world and doesn't know what to do. It sounds like he is almost at the point of wanting to join his dad in this other realm. And that's difficult to hear, but I think relatable. I think if we're all honest, we probably had thoughts of what's the point? Why am I here? This is too hard, and just difficult to know how to deal with this existence sometimes. But here he is. It's the middle of the night. He's having these intense thoughts of fear and reluctance at being here, and boom, it doesn't say he drifts off to sleep or what happens. It's almost like the lights click and he is suddenly in another dimension. So for him, there's no tunnel, there's no journey. He's just here 1 minute, and then the next he is in this other realm. In this realm, it's made of shimmering gold lights. The walls and the floor almost look like liquid fire. It's like he's in a volcano. It sounds like, and everything's sloshing around, and this bright sort of reddy orange colours. Except he actually describes it as gold and white lights, and he reckons it's a little bit. The way he says it's a little bit like a lava lamp. Or how the sun would look if we could look at the sun and walk up to the sun and experience the sun, and it's giving off this intense vibration or hum or energy, and this feeling he's getting from this dimension and these walls is pure love, and it feels beautiful. And he says he has a strong sense that this is his home. This is where he comes from. This is where he goes back to. And he's just loving this experience. So then he says there's a light coming from the left side, almost like daylight shining into his room, but there's no windows. The light is just coming through, and everything is perfect, and everything is how it should be, and he just wants to remain there. He has no thoughts on what's going on in this human realm. He doesn't think about his wife, his son, his dogs. Doesn't even look to see if he has a body. It's just him standing. He's present. He's just there, which is weird because he can see these glowing gold and white walls. He can experience them, but at the same time, he doesn't feel as though he has any senses or doesn't notice any to be able to do that. So every time I hear about these people in this other dimension who are able to experience what they're experiencing without a human body, it always blows my mind. I don't think this man actually mentions that he can't use words to describe it, but generally that's what they say. And for him, he gets an extra special touch to his experience in the terms of a spiritual master coming to visit him. In this case, it was Jesus. He describes him as pale white, which I have a little bit of an issue with, but at the same time, this is Nick's experience, and it's clearly to him this is how Jesus appeared. Why he appeared as pale white, I don't know, because I think it's quite a strong possibility that Jesus was a Middle Eastern appearance when he was living. But at the end of the day, what Jesus looks like is irrelevant. It's more what his soul is like and how he manifests himself to each individual spiritually transformative experience or near-death experience. It's irrelevant at the end of the day, because you and me I'm not Nick Dove and you're not whatever your name is, in reality, this is just the human being we're using to experience this physical realm, and it's not our true identities. This thing we call our soul or our consciousness is who we truly are, and we are just lost in this human form for this time we have here, and it's both a wonderful and difficult thing to experience, because it kind of this human form we have, it blocks us from knowing what we truly are. And I think this is what all these religions and spiritual masters and teachers trying to tell us while we're on earth, that we're not these human beings we think we are. There's something much more powerful and eternal to our true natures, and that exactly is, and what exactly that looks like is difficult to communicate with words. But yeah, anyway, Nick's here. He's experiencing this connection with a being he identifies as Jesus, and wow, like, good luck to him. Wow, I'm jealous. I would love to have that experience as well, and it gives hope to us all in that Nick doesn't die. He's just having a rough night's sleep and crosses dimensions just like that. So if it can happen to Nick, it can happen to anyone. And he has a bit of a humorous moment here, in that there is some telepathic communication going on with this being that he identifies as Jesus, and he's realizing that Jesus can read all his thoughts, and he's thinking, wow, Jesus is hot. I'm a male though. He might think I'm checking him out. And Jesus starts laughing, and it's all a bit of a joke. As he laughs, Nick gets this incredibly intense wave of love and vibration flood his whole being. It's as though Jesus is sending him pure, unconditional love. And there's no verbal communication at this point. It's just intense waves of bliss. And then Jesus says to him, look, humans can't even begin to wrap our minds around the concept of God. It's just beyond our conception or ability to understand, and it's quite obvious when you start to think about that in a little depth that it truly is impossible for us to understand what it is like to be a being of that infinite, intense, unconditional love and creative nature, to have made all of this and to be experiencing it all at once. And when you think of the size of the universe, not just planet Earth and all the beings here, and to think that this God, source energy, is experiencing every one of our lives with us, and then all the other beings, from the fleas to the mosquitoes to the squids to the bats to the that's just on one planet as well. Then you think of the infinite nature of the universe and all the things that are going on all at once. It's clearly beyond our comprehension to even consider what that is like, when we have enough trouble just dealing with this little experience of being human. Like, of course we're gonna struggle to even get close to imagining what that is like for a source of that we call God. But yeah, he says, look, God created humor, God created laughter, God created love, and this is what we should be trying to experience on earth, but obviously that's not always possible. Jesus says to him that we concentrate too much on rules, and that makes us feel bad about ourselves. So yeah, he's saying, I guess he's saying that, don't take life so seriously. Just do the best you can, and I guess minimize the pain if possible. He said that God made us all perfectly. When I hear that, it's great and it makes me feel good, but at the same time, there's a hell of a lot of suffering here on Earth, and to say that we are exactly where we should be and experiencing what we should be, it's bittersweet. Like, if you're in a good place like I am right now, yeah, great, yeah, sure, I'll go along with that. But the next time I'm suffering, I'll be angry to reflect on that statement and think, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. I'm meant to be hurting. I'm meant to be in pain. And the only way I get my head around that is to think that this pain that I'm experiencing, in whatever form it is forcing me to... It's reminding me that I am having a human experience, and this is part of the soul's journey, to experience both those things that give us pleasure and those that don't. And I try not to let the mind jump in and label it as bad and the other as good. I try to remain neutral and just see it as part of this experience. And I think there's an old Buddhist saying or something like that, saying this too will pass. And that is very true. Like, even those good, blissful, happy moments come and go, just like the darker and tougher moments. And that's just what being a human is all about. And the better we can navigate those humps and bumps and try not to see them as good or bad, but just part of the experience that comes and goes, the less consuming and daunting this life can be, I think. But yeah, he's just saying here that Jesus is saying to him that we're all on this path, and this path is designed exactly for us, and we're here to experience what we're experiencing. And I don't know, it doesn't go into free will here, but I guess every time I sort of hear that this path that we're on and this life we're on is all being sort of designed in some way, I start to think, how much of it was planned in a pre-birth state, and how much of it is down to us just going and exploring this world in our own human ways, and where does that line blur? Like, is this life destined to turn out the way it was planned to in a pre-birth state, or is it open to changes in course? And that whole pre-birth planning a life thing, it's hard for me to get my head around too, that we can, like near-death experiences will often say, we've planned a lot of what we experience before we even come here. And for me, who's lived a pretty easy life, really, compared to what other people go through, I can kind of almost give a bit of plausibility to that argument. But for those who have been born into these, appalling circumstances of abuse and sexual, physical, all poverty, it would be very difficult for them to take that leap and say that this is the life they choose to come into. But this is what some of these experiences say, and it's some, and when they talk about it, these people, they're absolutely adamant that this is the case, and it's really hard. Like, there's so many complexities and nuances to this topic, and discrepancies and contrasts, and maybe I've just overanalyzed it and explored the topic too much, because there's just too much information now. But generally, what I take out of them as, I don't know, if I had to sum it up in a few words, I'd say just unconditionally love everyone, and that seems to be what Source is. It's unconditional love, and although it's difficult to get our heads around in this realm, that is basically what most of these messages try to get through to us. And this is where we come from. Try to live that way in your human life, and regardless of whether you succeed or fail at that, you go back to that anyway. So that's generally what people seem to explore in this dimension or experience. So all of a sudden, Nick wakes up, he's back in his body, he's gasping for air, he's feeling himself adjust to his physical circumstances again, because, clearly he was in one dimension one moment and boom, back in the physical the next. And obviously for those of us, myself included, who's never really had an in-depth experience like this, it's hard to understand what that is actually like to go from one dimension to the next. Although I have experienced elements of it, I've never been totally consumed by another dimension like Nick has here. And to be thrown from one to the other so suddenly would be a very extreme thing to experience, especially when there wasn't something like a close brush with death to sort of give reason for it happening. You just here 1 minute and then you're there the next and then you're back here again. It would be very confusing. So, Nick says that life has continued on for him, and for him, like all of us, he says that life has not always been a bowl of cherries, and there are days of doubt and challenge, and we're here, he says, to learn from these experiences and instances, and to use them to push us in a direction of understanding and, I don't know, maybe even gratitude, if you can be grateful for those experiences of darkness. I think most of us can probably look back in some darker experiences in our lives and now see the gifts that they were. It's just at the time they are hard to deal with, but I think generally you can probably look back at some experience that was it was a nightmare to go through and see how that has changed you and turned you into the person you are today, and maybe it's even pushed you into this topic of spirituality, and when you put it like that, how can darkness be a bad thing if you've been pushed to understand the light better? It doesn't, it just proves that there's no such thing as good and bad, because if a bad thing happens and pushes you towards a so-called good thing, or is it a bad thing? It's an interesting topic anyway. Good and bad and evil and light and darkness. It's I don't know. I think it's a very human thing, and it gives us that experience of duality between one extreme to the other, and that understanding of what good or is and bad is, and it's sometimes I guess you just have to be a soul that comes into a human body to truly understand what that feels like, and we all know by now what good feels like and what bad feels like. It's but when you look back at it with a little bit more depth and focus, you can see that so-called hard situations to deal with actually turned out to be the biggest blessings in your life, and just this is life, this is humanity, this is what we all experience, and hopefully these experiences try to give us a bit more depth to our understanding of what being a human actually means, and how precious it is. So this Nick, he's saying, like, he has a chat with his mum. I'm a little bit perplexed by how this experience ends, but I will comment on it anyway. So he's talking to his mum a few months later, and his mum says that it was probably Satan disguised as Jesus, telling him to live a life of sin. Now, I don't know how his mum gets that after what I've just read. Like, how does Satan give you unconditional love and a little bit of wisdom in terms of having explained to him that we're all perfect and we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, and how that turns into Satan, I don't understand. But I guess that's, everyone has their own conditioning and being taught certain ways of what this spiritual realm is like, and others, lots of people have this very strong religious background, and that's fine. Like, whatever puts you on the path and keeps you sane, and then I don't argue with that. It just sounds a little bit unusual to me to think that someone could start calling Jesus Satan when clearly this man was experiencing someone he was dead set certain was Jesus. And I guess we're all going to interpret these experiences differently, and the way I'm looking at it is clearly very different to how his mum sees it. But we've all there's no such thing as right and wrong. We're all just going to look at things slightly differently, and that doesn't mean anyone's seeing it more accurately than the next. It just is the way we interpret it. But it does sound a little bit unusual to me. So that's the end of Nick's experience. Not a near-deather, as I said towards the start, but still a lot to take out of it. Like all these experiences, there's so many layers and elements to discuss, and I just love reading them for you, and hopefully it gives you that escape from this human realm for a little bit, and gives you that impetus to go and explore the topic a little bit more, because there's many better people than me out there researching this topic, and I personally get a lot more out of those interviews where the people themselves are telling the experience. And I have been very lazy this year. I was sort of gave myself a goal to get a few more interviews happening, but I haven't gotten around to it. But I'll do my best to get back into that. But even if I don't, there's plenty more people out there doing it. So go out there, explore, and find out for yourself whether you think this is a topic that has some validity, or it's up to you. I just hope that or honoured to spend this bit of time with you, even though it's not in person, just over this podcast. And thank you for listening. And I look forward to talking to you next week. And I send you love, peace, happiness, kindness, and just do the best you can. Talk soon. you.